For the latest in strategic affairs, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Click the bell icon for updates.
Hello and welcome to The Gist on Strat News Global. Good evening, I am Surya Gangadharan, and this evening we are going to look at a book, The Pashtuns' Contested History by Tilak Devasher, member of the National Security Advisory Board and our guest this evening. Congratulations, Tilak, this is your latest work.
Thank you very much.
And there is a series of books on Pakistan you've written and now on the ethnic groups.
Yes.
So what's so important about the Pashtuns? Is it the fault line, current fault line in Pakistan?
You know, let me begin with a very simple reason. When I was growing up, I knew two things about the Pashtuns, as the Pathans, as the Pashtuns are called in India. One, all of us have read Rabindranath Tagore's Kabuliwala, 1892. And second is India's first fairness cream, Afghan Snow. Both these are very benign. And then one read about Abdul Ghaffar Khan, close friend of Gandhiji, his non-violent struggle for India's freedom. Again, a very benign figure. And Bollywood Pashtun, with the projection of the Pathan as a friend of the oppressed, especially women. And a host of actors who traced their origins to Pashtun ancestry. But when I became older, I was stunned by the violence in Afghanistan and the Pak-Afghan border. You had the PDP revolution, the bloody coup, the Soviet intervention. You had the Mujahideen, the devastating civil war, rise of the Taliban, the 9/11 attacks and the war on terror. Now the Taliban back in power. So, this was totally in contrast to the image I had as a child while growing up. So I said, hey, what went wrong? So that was one reason, a very simplistic reason. But more than that, see, the fact of the matter is the Pashtuns matter and they matter vitally. And the reason is that understanding of the Pashtuns, their culture, their history, Pashtunwali, the way of the Pashtun, and two Pashtun forces, Pashtun nationalism and Pashtun extremism, are critical to ensure peace and stability in this region. Lack of proper understanding of this and then the wrong kind of prescriptions have led to violence and terrorism in this area for the last 40 years in war. So unless and until we know and study this region carefully, it will radiate violence in the entire region. You have refugees, you have drugs, you have ungoverned spaces where international terrorism is incubating. So what I have done is, even though the Pashtuns are divided between two countries, I have not looked at the countries per se, but I put the people in the center of the book. The Pashtuns on both sides. I treat them as one ethnic entity inhabiting a single piece of real estate and studied them. So that's why I think, that's why this book, that's why this subject is important.
So I've noticed you have three separate chapters. One on the Afghan Taliban, one on the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, and another on the PTM, the Pashtun Tahaffuz Movement. So they are all Pashtuns, but with different goals.
Different ideologies and goals. You see, the Afghan Taliban rose in a specific context in the 90s after the devastating, when the devastating civil war after the Soviets had left. The Mujahideen couldn't come together and everybody started fighting, amongst each other. So it was a very local force with a local problem at Kandahar. Later, due to massive Pakistani support, they managed to spread their tentacles and at one time they controlled most of Afghanistan. But their attention is focused on Afghanistan itself. The Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan is a Pak-based and a Pak-focused organization. And they arose in the context of the attack which was launched on Lal Masjid in Islamabad in 2007. Though Lal Masjid is not in the tribal areas, most of the students were. So the PTM is basically a force which arose from the erstwhile federally administered tribal areas, and especially North and South Waziristan agencies. Their initial goal was to hit out, revenge, which is a very strong element of Pashtunwali, to hit out of the Pakistan Army and Pakistan government institutions. Later on spread to impose Sharia in the area, and now it is escalating towards a more nationalist stance. They want demerger of FATA from NWFP and some sort of a self-rule, if not independence. Now the Pashtun Tahaffuz Movement is totally against, it's a different, it's also a park-based, park-focused group, but it is non-violent, and it is more like a civil rights movement which wants that their grievances should be sorted out within the constitutional framework of Pakistan, and Pakistan should stop treating Pashtuns as cannon fodder for their foreign policy goals. Now, all the three are Pashtuns. I think amongst all of them, it is the PTM that has the opportunity to frame, a larger vision for the Pashtuns in Pakistan. And because it wants peace in FATA, and you cannot have peace in FATA without peace in Afghanistan. So it also depends whether PTM will then step up to the plate and frame a larger vision for Pashtuns on both sides of the Durand line. I mean, that's futuristic, that's in the future. But answering this question of the three of them getting together, depends on many factors. I think the key factor will be how Pakistan attitude and how Pakistan's policy is towards the Pashtuns. If Pakistan mishandles this situation, then there is greater potential of these three Pashtun organizations and, sort of at least collaborating to begin with, if not cooperating. Of course, the fact that PTM is non-violent, the other two are violent, is a bit of a handicap in coming together, but certainly the common culture, Pashtun Wali, language, this is all sort of common.
You use the word mishandled. Now, when you look at the history of Pakistan's involvement with the Pashtuns, one can say that they've mishandled it terribly. They've inflicted every kind of atrocity in all these years. Yet the Pashtuns have remained largely, anger has simmered, but they haven't really revolted against the Pakistani.
Except the TTP.
Except TTP,
yeah. TTP, because they really broke out and they are, bleeding Pakistan, as it were. Even today, there are one attack after the other almost on a daily basis, and not only limited to the erstwhile FATA, but it's also spread now to Swat, which at one time had been cleared, and also other parts. For example, the Chinese engineers who were killed while constructing a dam, it was done also by the TTP. So the anger is simmering just below the surface. Today, many of the Pashtuns are not in a position to take on the Pakistan army in a direct confrontation. But you take the case of the Afghan Taliban. Pakistan had hoped that with the Taliban in Kabul, they will accept the Durand line as the international border between Pakistan and Afghanistan. They haven't done that. In fact, they've disputed it. They've called it an unresolved issue.
Was it very naive on their part to think so?
Yeah. They thought that 20 years...
Amazing.
They thought that for 20 years, they have supported them. You see, even in the first avatar of the Taliban in 1990s, thrice Pakistan tried to get Mullah Omar to accept the Durand line. And all three times he just threw them out. He said, nothing of the sort. This is not my decision to make. It's for the people of Afghanistan to make. Secondly, the Pakistan had hoped that the Taliban would defang the TTP, who have got sanctuaries in Afghanistan. And the Afghan Taliban said nothing of the sort. And it won't happen. Because when the Taliban needed shelter and refuge, it was the tribals, the tribes in North and South Waziristan who gave them shelter. Now that the TTP requires shelter and refuge, as per norms of Pashtun Wali, there is no way that the Taliban would attack them. They've told Pakistan, we will facilitate your talks, it's your problem, you sort it out, we will not do anything against the TTP, but you talk to them. So twice they facilitated talks, but the talks came to naught. They didn't sort of fructify.
So tell me, you have a lot of Pashtuns in the Pakistani military, general levels, so what about the pressures on them?
You see, the Pashtuns in Pakistan are not one category. There are at least three different kinds of Pashtuns. There are the Islamists, with a strong Islamic sort of background. There are the statists who don't want any change, don't want to do anything to do with the Durand line, people you mentioned. And then the Pashtun nationalists. Now, these are not fixed or frozen categories. They keep changing. I think at the time of partition, the Pashtun nationalists were in a majority. After the Soviet intervention, the Islamists came into their own. The statists have remained more or less the same, except that when more and more people join government, they join the army or become into economically integrated, then the statists also go up. So these categories keep varying. Now the way Pakistan is developing and it's sort of heading galloping towards the abyss, you never know, the Pashtuns may have a rethink. But, you know, this is, so it's not a very happy thing for Pakistan that despite being a lot of Pashtun generals, and Karachi is the largest Pashtun city in the world.
Yeah.
But despite all this, you never know what the future will hold.
No, you've been in intelligence, you've monitored Pakistan for many years. Do you have instances of Pashtuns in the army, you know, mutinying or deserting or?
Yes, when in 2004, when Musharraf launched his crackdown in Waziristan under the US pressure, a lot of the Frontier Corps people refused to sort of participate, simply because there were Pashtuns on the other side, and if he killed another Pashtun, the revenge will carry on for hundreds of years. As the Pashtun saying goes, that he took revenge after 100 years and said it was too soon. So Pashtuns, this badal or revenge, it festers. It festers from generation to generation. So they're keenly aware of this. So there were a lot of reluctance for the Pashtun soldiers to take on their brethren on the other side.
But does this affect discipline? Is there an issue of command? And
I don't think that has happened in the army per se. Frontier Corps is officered by the Pakistan Army, the paramilitary. But there have been cases of animosity within the army, you know, the attacks on Musharraf. I'm not sure whether that was Pashtun oriented against Punjabis, but one example I'll give you. You know, when Ghulam Shah Khan dismissed Nawaz Sharif, Ghulam Shah Khan was the Pashtun, there was jubilation among the Pashtuns. Pashtun has hammered a Punjabi. You know, that feeling is there. I'm not saying it's prevalent or it's predominant or it's whatever, but that feeling is there because the Punjabi is 52% of the population. He is dominating every sphere of activity. So the Pashtuns are now beginning to realize, especially with the Pashtun Tahaffuz Movement, that's how we came to the fore, that what the Bengalis, what the Baloch and what the Sindhis had realized earlier, that for a non-Punjabi to get justice in Pakistan is extremely difficult. You see, the PTM, when it arose, was because of the background of the alienation that had been created. 2 million people became refugees, IDPs, in Waziristan when the army carried out operations. They took shelter in camps or in the urban areas of Pakistan. And there they were racially profiled. Anybody looking like an Afghan was immediately suspect as a terrorist. So that bred a lot of alienation. So when that, in January 2018, when that Masood was killed in Karachi, Naqibullah Masood, the dam just burst and the silence is long march, and that's how the PTM was formed. So yes, there is a lot of alienation in Pakistan. It hasn't come to the fore, as you mentioned, because of they're weak, they're not can't face the Pakistan army, but it's certainly there. It's not a comfortable thing for Pakistan.
So does the PTM and the Afghan Taliban, do they have a relationship of some kind? Do they seek advice, counsel? I mean, is there any?
I have no knowledge or information on that. But you know, being Pashtuns, having familial bonds, married on both sides of the border, I'm sure there will be some sort of a connection. But it hasn't been apparent or hasn't come out. I mean, I don't recall the Afghan Taliban having made any statement supporting the PTM.
So would you say the Pashtuns are the biggest fault line today?
Certainly the biggest fault line and the biggest threat to Pakistan's integrity. And this has been there since 1947. You know, when Ghaffar Khan first raised the issue of Pashtunistan, when the British rammed down a referendum, so he said the choice cannot no longer be between India and Pakistan. There has to be the third option of Pashtunistan. And then for various reasons that was shot down. So the choice became India and Pakistan, and they boycotted, and you know, rest is history. But he is raising the demand of Pashtunistan made Pakistan extremely suspicious. And then various Afghan governments, especially that of Muhammad Dawood, has played up the Pashtunistan issue intermittently. Because so for Pakistan, the worry is that you have Pashtun nationalism in Pakistan, you have Afghan irredentism on the other side. And were the two to sort of meet, you know, it will be disastrous for Pakistan. So Pakistan's policy since 47, but largely after the 1970s, has been to weaken Pashtun nationalism in Pakistan and to manipulate Afghan irredentism by having a friendly and dependent government in Kabul that is friendly towards Pakistan and dependent on Pakistan. Therefore, they are very suspicious of Indian activities in Afghanistan because they feel that India will keep egging the Afghan governments to take up or rake up the issue of the Durand line. See, Durand line is a big fault line in Pakistan. Though Pakistan may sort of say that we are fenced state, this is an international border and all, in the hearts of hearts they know it is not. That's why, otherwise, why would they keep insisting on every government that you recognize the Durand line? In 1949, there was the Loya Jirga in Afghanistan, in which they rescinded all treaties with British India, starting from the 1879 Treaty of Gandamak, the 1901, the 1905, and the 1931, and of course the 1893 Durand line.
This was whose government?
It was in 1949.
It was the Loya Jirga.
Yeah, it was the Loya Jirga, or by the Musaiban, the Mohammad Zais who were in power. So, as far as the Afghan government, and no Afghan government since then has changed this, including the Taliban, including Zahir Shah, including Karzai, including this Ghani. Everybody has said that Loya Jirga decision stands as it is. So, as far as the Afghans are concerned, there is no border. So now that Pakistan is fencing it, the Taliban have gone and places uprooted it. Said this is an unresolved issue. We don't recognize it. This divides brothers. So you can't fence it. Pakistan is aware of it. Therefore, they keep pressing on the Taliban. You accept it. You accept it. If they were sure as a stronger power that this is the border, why would they bother about why the Afghans accept it or not?
Yeah.
So they know that this is a weak spot. This is a fault line.
So what happens to Afghanistan in the event of the Pashtuns coming together? And what about the minority areas of Afghanistan?
So, there are different conceptions of Pashtunistan. One is a greater Afghanistan, with the Pashtun areas of Pakistan
merge with the...
The other is a, a autonomous Pashtun area within Pakistan that is uniting all the Pashtun areas, including northern Balochistan, which is Pashtun, up to Quetta and north of Quetta.
Yeah.
And the federally administered tribal areas and KPK into one autonomous province.
That's a huge area.
That's a huge area. But so is Punjab. Punjab is also a huge area. Balochistan is a huge area. And there are only 4 provinces, so areas look bigger. Or an independent Pashtunistan within Pakistan. An independent entity. So there are different conceptions. And this is the problem also on the Pashtuns, that they have no common vision what actually they want. Because there have been so many pulls and pressures on religious lines, on ethnic lines, on political lines. So they have no conception themselves. And this is one of the things that I mentioned, that the Pashtun intellectuals have to paint a vision of what they want, which is acceptable to everybody, which then the politicians can translate into action.
So is this something the PTM is working on?
Not only the PTM, there was a small shoot. It's called the Pashtun Qaumi Jirga. The third such meeting was held earlier this year in March, where all Pashtuns, from the Awami National Party, the Pashtun Mili Awami Party, the PMLN, the PPP, different groups got together in this Pashtun Qaumi Jirga and tried to envisage or tried to project this particular vision or what should. So it's a very small shoot. I don't know how successful it will be in the future, but at least they realize the problem. And that's why they got together. They talked about Afghanistan, that elections is the only way forward. Have a Loya Jirga and call for elections. They talked about women's rights and all kinds of things. So, it's a small shoot. So, not necessarily, and the PTM was also part of this. So, let's see if they actually develop this further.
So, last question. Where does India figure in all this? We keep hearing Pakistani accusations that we are helping the Pashtuns. You also mentioned that India had a high level of activity in Afghanistan at one point. So where do we stand? What are we doing?
See, I think a lot of people have forgotten that India has very strong and deep civilizational links with the Pashtuns. Let's not forget Mahabharat Gandhari is from Peshawar. Peshawar used to be called Gandhar. This whole area was part of Chandragupta Maurya's empire. And grandson Ashok, even so many Buddhist inscriptions, pillars are still being excavated. There was the Buddhist kingdom in Bamiyan, like there was the Hindu Shahi kingdom in Kabul. Then on the reverse side, the Delhi Sultanate had 3 Pashtun dynasties. You had the Khiljis, you had the Lodhis, and you had the Suris. Then you've had the Rohilas, you had principalities in Bhopal, you have principalities in Tonk. I've been told that the largest repository of Pashtun manuscripts and documents is actually in India, most of it in private collections. We at least need to have a Pashtun study center who can put these things together. So we have very strong civilizational links. And I think every government of India realizes this. So at the people-to-people level, that's why there's 50,000 tons of wheat, sending vaccine, humanitarian assistance. India will always be involved in that. But more than that, I don't think so. Any government of India, we're part of an international state system. We're a responsible country. There's no way that we are going to, But yes, so we have a technical mission now in Kabul to do humanitarian assistance. But we are certainly not going to cut ourselves off from the people of Afghanistan, Pashtuns especially, and also the Tajik Hazaras and the Uzbeks.
But I'm sure we have some connections with the TTP, or maybe through now that we have the embassy that has reopened in Kabul, I would presume there will be direct contacts and there are opportunities here.
I don't know, I retired 8 years ago, so I am not. At my time, there was no such link at all whatsoever. But yes, because they are in Kabul, I'm sure for technical and for humanitarian assistance, they must be with the government of the day. Must be talking to the government. But TTP is Pak-based. They may have some refuge on R&R, like what the Taliban had in Pakistan before they took over power. There must be some, but the TTP, I don't think we have any connection at all with the TTP.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you a very speculative question. What do you expect will happen in these areas, say, over the next 5 years? What do you expect?
You see, the key here is what does Pakistan do? If Pakistan treats this civil rights movement, the PTM, like they did in Bangladesh, as somebody said, if all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. If they hammer these guys, then there will be one kind of reaction. I don't see the Pakistan army acting in any other way. This is what they are trained to do. This is what they will do. Similarly with the TTP, they have put a lot of things against the TTP, but the TTP is still, harming them in many ways. Similarly, now there are problems with the Afghan Taliban. There have been exchange of fires. The checkpost at Chaman has been stopped for for a week or so. I think it's restarted recently. They have not accepted the Durand line, and their spokesman has said that this is an unresolved issue, we don't recognize it. So there are problems. The price that Pakistan fought for 20 years to have Taliban in Kabul is turning very much into ashes. The enthusiasm that Pakistan had a year ago in August 21, when Imran Khan saying that they have broken the shackles of slavery and India is out of it, and India has lost this and India has lost that. It's a very different mood in Pakistan today. They realize that the Afghan Taliban are a problem, the TTP are a problem, and the PTM will be a problem if it is not handled properly.
But it's also strange how, despite all these years of manipulating the Pashtuns, they know them so little. That's an indictment of the Pakistani military.
Yeah, it's an indictment of the Punjabis, really.
Yeah, Punjabis, really. Tilak Devasher, lovely talking to you. Great insight. And looking forward to the next book from your pen.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much for having me here. And I look forward to having a few conversations in the future too. Thank you very much.
Pleasure talking to you.
Thank you.
That's all we have this evening on The Gist. Do subscribe to our YouTube channel. Follow us on social media and Instagram. Thank you and good night.